Today on Lewis on the Law, I've got another great show for you guys today. I have attorney Alicia Mack in the studio with me, and we're going to talk about workers' compensation. That's right, so hold on to your seats. We'll get started in just a minute. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. I've got an awesome show for you guys today. I have attorney Alicia Mack on the show with me today, and we're going to talk about workers' compensation. Alicia is a workers' compensation and personal injury attorney, and she has is this correct? You have a bilingual law firm?
That's correct.
Okay.
I speak a little bit of Spanish, and my associate speaks a lot.
Oh, wow. I had no idea. I thought you just had a law firm. I didn't realize you guys were crossing barriers and breaking down lines.
Yes. Well, workers' compensation comes up a lot with people who do construction work and other type of labor-intensive jobs. So speaking Spanish is really important.
Okay, well, that makes sense. And so we're talking about workers' compensation, and let's just take this back. What are you talking about when you're talking about workers' compensation? All workers are compensated, aren't we?
Hopefully, they should be. But workers' compensation is specifically talking about benefits, both medical and lost wages, that a covered injured worker can receive if they're injured or they have an illness caused by their occupation. That's called workers' comp.
Oh, okay. Does everybody get workers' comp? I mean, am I covered? I'm out there working all the time.
So
I hurt my pinky the other day.
So not everyone is entitled to workers' compensation, but most of us are. The vast majority of people, at least in the state of Georgia, are covered. So one common misconception that I want to discuss first is the idea that there's time requirements for workers' comp. So you're entitled to workers' comp benefits your very first day on the job. It's not after a probationary period. You don't have to work for a year like you do under some federal benefits. You don't even have to be full-time. As long as you are an employee, you're entitled to workers' comp from day one. So I think that's a big thing for people to know.
Yeah, I thought that. I mean, I didn't know. I thought that you had to be on the job for like 6 months or something, and then you could like fall down the steps and hurt your knee, and then you're good to go.
No, you can do it on day one. As long as they've hired you. So if you're in the interviewing stages, that you could not claim workers' comp if you're injured on the job for an interview or if you're going for a medical evaluation or training. But as long as you are currently an employee, then you're eligible for workers' comp.
So don't slip and fall on your job interview. Wait till they actually hire you, right?
If that's your angle.
Well, we're not promoting any angles here.
No.
Okay, so who is it that covers you? Is it the employer that covers you, or is it the state? Who are you getting money from?
So you're really getting money from an insurance company. The state of Georgia requires any company that has 3 or more employees to carry workers' comp insurance or to self-insure. So there are some larger companies that self-insure, maybe like Coca-Cola, like state and local governments, but most businesses purchase workers' comp insurance just like you would purchase your car insurance or your homeowner's insurance. And then in the event that a covered employee is injured, that insurance company is going to step in and pay the benefits.
Okay, but is every single person covered? Because I actually contract with 2 large corporations, and I'm not actually a real employee. They just they pay me, but I just come in there and I do work.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of the biggest exclusions under workers' comp is those that are considered independent contractors. So I'll give an example. A true example of an independent contractor, let's say, is someone who comes to a business to wash the windows, right? So they're at Office Depot. They don't work for Office Depot. They're not an employee. They're just there to wash the windows, and then they're going to move on to another business. If someone is there and injured while washing windows, they are not going to be entitled to workers' comp benefits from Office Depot because they don't really work there. They're someone independent that's there to perform a service. Yes, they're being compensated, but they're not under the control of the company. And that's the real question for workers' comp is in determining whether someone is an employee or independent contractor is a matter of control. It comes up a lot in construction cases and also people who drive commercial vehicles. So long-haul truckers or delivery men, a lot of times people will be paid as an independent contractor. So for business purposes, they may be paid on a 1099 form. They may have an agreement that says they're independent, But despite all of that, the if someone is injured, they may still be able to get workers' comp if the nature of the relationship is really that of an employee, not of an independent contractor.
Okay, well, how do you make this determination then? I mean, how do you tell what is an employee and what is who is an independent contractor?
So the best way is to contact a lawyer. So if you've been injured and you're concerned about whether you really are an independent contractor or you are a covered employee, speaking to a lawyer is going to be your best bet. But generally, the courts are looking at control. Who controls the time, method, place, and manner of the work that's being performed? So going back to Office Depot hiring window washers, the window washers come with their own supplies. They perform a service that's different from what they do at Office Depot. Office Depot sells supplies, window washers wash windows. In contrast, if you have someone, let's say Office Depot is paying the cashier as an independent contractor, but she only works for Office Depot. She's there every week. She has a set schedule. Office Depot is providing a uniform. They trained her. They're controlling how she does her work. She's going to actually be a covered employee, even if Office Depot chooses to pay her or call her an independent contractor.
Oh, okay. That seems like that would muddle a line a little bit there. I mean, especially if they're calling her an independent contractor and they're telling her what to do, putting her in a uniform, she's standing behind. I mean,
yes.
I'm not really quite sure how they'd get away with that in the first place.
Well, they shouldn't, and that's kind of an exaggerated example. So it won't come up so much with a traditional business. It's really going to be in the context of drivers. That's why I see it personally in my practice is a company that's running a shuttle or delivering goods, and they're paying their driver as a 1099, and then there becomes a legitimate question about whether that driver is independent or whether they're really an employee of the business.
Okay, so does immigration status actually affect that at all? You said you had a lot of Spanish-speaking clients, and in the construction industry, there's a lot of Spanish-speaking people, and
Sure.
probably a lot of people who are affected by this type of issue, because it's easy to get hurt
When you're building.
hauling bricks,
Absolutely. And immigration status is an area under, I guess, coverage that does come up frequently. So the general rule is that the lack of valid paperwork or having the right to work in the U.S. does not prevent you from claiming workers' comp benefits. That's the general rule.
Now, that's actually surprising. I'm actually surprised by that, especially in this new climate.
Yes, I agree. Thus far, there has not been any changes, though. So you are entitled to the same benefits as someone who does have a valid right to work in the U.S. There's two small circumstances where it may affect benefits and the availability of light duty work, but those are things that come up on a case-by-case basis. The general rule is that, yes, you are entitled to benefits.
Okay, so you're entitled to benefits if you're an employee. You may be entitled to benefits if you're a contractor, depending on the status, and
Yes.
you're even entitled to benefits if your immigration status isn't valid. Is there some sort of disqualification in here?
So there are whole classes of people that are disqualified based on the nature of their work. And that's something we may discuss in greater detail when talking about things that small business owners should consider. But for example, agriculture workers, farm workers, migrant farm workers, domestic workers, and also railroad workers are categorically excluded from the statute. They're not entitled to workers' comp benefits no matter how many a particular company employs.
Wait a minute. Say that one more time. List those workers again.
So farm workers, domestic workers. So that's
Domestic
and when we
workers
say
like your
domestic,
maid?
no. So domestic meaning working for an individual in a residence as opposed to something commercial or as opposed to a company who's in the business of providing janitorial services. So if I work for Molly Maid and I go out to different people's homes and provide services, Molly Maid needs to have workers' compensation benefits. If you're just an individual and you have someone or a group of people who periodically maybe cook for you or clean, they come by and do periodic cleaning, they're not going to be entitled to workers' comp benefits.
Okay, and farm workers are also excluded?
Yes.
That seems odd. I mean, that's a high labor, high risk, high
It is.
work effort type of position.
And I do believe that there are certain federal laws, though, that may apply to them. So they're just excluded. Workers' comp, at least in the scope that I'm discussing today, is about Georgia statute and Georgia rules. So some of these classes of people that are excluded are covered under federal law. The railroad workers, in particular, I know there's a specific workers' comp statute for people that work with the railroad.
Okay, so I think we're getting the signal that that our time is almost up on this segment. Alicia, why don't you give them some contact information for you?
Sure. So the best way to reach me is definitely by phone. My phone number is 770-450-9599. You can always find me just by Googling Attorney Mack. So that should bring up.
I can Google Attorney Mack.
You can Google Attorney
awesome.
Mack. So my website is attorneymack.com. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn as Attorney Mack. So that would be kind of the best way to reach me.
You are listening to Lewis on the Law. We've got another super exciting segment on workers' comp coming right after these messages. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I will be your host for the next 38 minutes or something like that. I don't know. I was never very good in math. Lewis on the Law is a show that's designed to empower you. We come to you each and every single week to give you legal information. This information is not designed to replace the advice of an attorney. If you have a serious legal issue, you need to go ahead and contract with an attorney. If you can't find an attorney, you can always contact me. I may be able to help you with your issue, or I may be able to find an attorney who can help you with your issue. All my shows are archived on my website. You can go to jameslewislegal.com, and eventually every single legal topic you can think about will be soon archived on my show one of these days. It's a big goal, but I've got a couple of years to kill here in the studio, so I think we can get around to getting each and every single legal topic that you can think of. I've got a great show for you today. We're talking workers' compensation. I have attorney Alicia Mack in the studio with me. Attorney Mack, give them some contact information for you.
Sure. So the easiest thing you can do to find me is just to Google Attorney Mack or Google Attorney Mack in Atlanta. That should bring up my website, which is attorneymack.com. Should bring up my Facebook and LinkedIn profiles, which are also under Attorney Mack. And you can also give me a call. My phone number is 770-450-9599.
Yeah, and you can always give me a call. My number is 404-610-0075. If you have a topic that you'd like to hear on this show, you can go ahead and hit me on my contact page. If I like the topic, I'll bring in an attorney who actually knows something about the topic, and we'll talk about it on air. Okay, Attorney Mack, let's talk about what kind, because I know not every single kind of injury could be covered. I have this really nasty paper cut on my finger, and I deal a lot of. I deal with a lot of leases, and then I have closings, residential closings going on, all kinds of stuff that involves huge stacks of paper. I mean, can I be compensated for that?
Yes.
Really? Okay. I thought I was joking here,
no,
but okay.
But we have to use the word compensation very loosely for that hypothetical.
Yeah, okay.
So, in general, the injury does not have to be of a certain severity to be eligible for workers' comp benefits. However, the smaller your injury is, then the less benefits you'll need. Right? So the most important thing that workers' comp provides is medical treatment, covered medical care. So if you had a paper cut or a series of paper cuts that were really bad, or they somehow, you got a paper cut and then you waste something in it on the job and then your finger is swollen and red, yes, you can.
Ouch, that sounds horrible. I think I'm going to get mine taken care of right now.
Even just a paper cut is bad. So I'm not sure where this hypothetical is coming from. But in any event, if it happens to you, yes, you can report it to your supervisor, report it to your job, and you should be able to have a visit with a doctor paid for by your company about that finger. So there aren't levels in terms of severity that you need to hit in order to be entitled to covered medical treatment and lost wages. You're probably not going to have any lost wages from a finger cut, but if it escalated, you would be entitled to that.
When your main job every day is shuffling big stacks of paper, and when I'm talking leases, I'm not talking like your 5-page residential lease. I'm talking commercial 200-page commercial lease. So that's heavy duty.
I don't envy you. I went paperless for a reason. I'm a paperless office now.
Very nice. I don't think that I can actually work to every single type of industry. Some places require a wet signature.
Ugh,
Okay.
well, but along the lines, though, in terms of types of injuries, so a paper cut is fine, but I think a bigger area where people have questions are illnesses. So I think we all know that if you're working and you fall, or you fall off a ladder, or you hurt your shoulder, it's a physical injury, and you know that, or I hope most of us know that you can file a workers' compensation claim for that. But the statute also covers illnesses, which are diseases that are stem from your occupation, and certain other diseases that we see even outside of an occupational tie. So, for instance, within the last, I want to say 2 years, Governor Deal signed into law a new bill that provides coverage to firefighters for certain types of cancer that have been related to, smoke and soot and other hazards that are innate in the work that they do. So, likewise, I've had several clients where there's maybe been a chemical spill and they've inhaled substances and then have respiratory problem. That's going to be covered. You don't have to have an injury to your physical body in order to claim workers' comp. I've handled cases with heart attacks, cases with hernias, strokes. There's different diseases that can be related to your work, either because there's a toxic substance involved or the job is very stressful or strenuous, and therefore certain illnesses are also covered.
Okay, so the illness has to be connected to the job that you're working at?
Yes. So definitely injuries that are an illness and not an injury, not a physical injury, are more complicated, and they really do require a lawyer because they're typically denied by your company and by their insurance company, just because that area law is not well understood. So I think a lot of times where people feel like it's job related are industries where they're coming into contact with different chemicals and substances, but also mold. I've seen even in just a regular office building where there's lots of moisture problems, then a mold problem is in the office, and then people start getting sick. That's something that it's compensable. It's the nature of the building that you're working in, that your employer has put you in, that's causing this illness.
Okay, so when you talk about work-related illnesses, the first thing that comes to my mind, because I sit in an office, so I'm not going to get an office cold, though I have gotten office colds before. I don't know if you've ever been there, and the cold circulates around everyone.
Yes.
You hear one person sneezing over there, and next week you've got a box of Kleenex, and you're just going through like crazy. But what I think of is stress, and is it compensable for mental illnesses?
So yes and no. Generally speaking, if your job makes you stress, and so you start, you may be feeling depressed or anxiety, that alone is not going to be compensable workers' comp. Okay, so this is an area where it's very different from state to state what the rules are. In the state of Georgia, you have to start with the actual physical impact or physical injury. So one of the landmark cases involved a truck driver who was involved in a motor vehicle accident. He was an employee, not an independent contractor. And the accident was very serious, and the driver in the other vehicle was killed, and he saw that person's body. And so in addition to neck and back problems, and I want to say a knee injury, but he suffered from PTSD. That's going to be compensable. It's related to a physical incident. There's also physical injuries accompanying it. That's going to be compensable. You can see a counselor for PTSD, for depression, things like that.
Yeah, that sounds pretty stressful to me, to get into a car accident and watching a dead body get thrown around.
Absolutely. And in my experience, a lot of times the psychiatric injuries last longer.
Yeah, I could see how that would be. I mean, you're scarred for life, right? Yeah. Okay, so what if you're a victim of a crime at the workplace?
So this is a bit of a gray area. But the question, again, for workers' comp, we're always looking to, is the incident or accident related to the work or the nature of the work? So the most obvious example is going to be people that work in security. So if you're a bouncer and you're asking someone nicely to leave and they shoot you or they attack you
That's
and
not
you
a good
are
day.
thereby injured, that's going to be compensable workers' comp. If I'm working at a radio station and my spouse or ex-spouse comes to the job and there's some type of physical altercation, that's not going to be workers' comp, right? Because
wait a minute. What if your spouse comes to your job and shoots up the place?
well,
is it not compensable?
For other people, it may be a gray area. I think for others, because they were there working for that employer, then were they subject to that. But for the individuals whose spouse it is, they're definitely not going to be entitled to workers' comp because the motivation behind the attack is not business related. If your manager is upset with you because you didn't file the TPO reports right and the staple wasn't right, and so they hit you, then that's going to be workers' comp because the act is motivated by something work-related. It's motivated by your work product. So it can somewhat be a case-by-case example. It gets really complicated on rape cases. I've seen the court kind of stretch the definition because it's hard to see that having a relationship to the job. But there are cases out there where workers' comp has been held to be applicable to rape cases.
Wow. Okay. I'm not sure I want to go there just yet.
Sure.
Okay. Now we were talking about the truck driver who got into an accident. So I take it car accidents are covered. But if you're not actually at work at that point, you're a trucker, but you're leaving, you've just dropped stuff off, and you're leaving. Is that still covered? Are you still covered in an accident there?
So in that scenario, if they've delivered goods, but they're headed back to their place of employment or headed to their next job, it is going to be covered. For motor vehicle accidents, there's really two things to consider. First, whose vehicle are you in? If you're driving a company vehicle, you're almost always going to be covered, okay? Unless you stole it and just, you're going haywire, you're going to be covered. If you're in your personal vehicle, then the question is, were you driving towards or in the process of performing an act that's relevant to your job or on behalf of your company, or were you in the vehicle to do something personal? So if you're asked to run an errand, go pick up something, go drop off something at the bank, and you're in a motor vehicle accident, yes, that's going to be covered workers' comp.
Okay, we're getting some really great stuff. I'll be right back. We'll be right back with you in a minute. Lewis on the Law comes to you each and every single week. And in our next segment, we're going to get into more stuff. We're going to get into what benefits you're entitled to. I still want to hear a little bit more about the mental distress because I've worked in corporate law offices and talked about a stressful situation. Yeah. We'll be right back after these messages. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and we have yet another super exciting show for you guys. We're talking workers' compensation with attorney Alicia Mack. Attorney Mack, can you give them some contact information for you real quickly?
Sure. So the easiest way to reach me or to find my phone number or my email address is just by Googling Attorney Mack. If you Google Attorney Mack Atlanta, you'll find my website, which is attorneymack.com. My LinkedIn and Facebook should also come up. They're both under Attorney Mack. And if you want to give me a call, my phone number is 770-450-9599.
Excellent. Lewis on the Law comes to you each and every single week, and we are here to bring you legal information. This isn't legal advice. We're not designed to replace the advice of an attorney. If you have a serious legal issue, you need to go ahead and contract with an attorney. You can always give me a call or at 404-610-0075, or you can just hit me at my email at james@jameslewislegal.com, or even come to my website, jameslewislegal.com. Drop me a line, and I'll help you find an attorney if I can't help you with your issue. I have kind of a narrow range of things that I actually deal with, so I may not be able to help you, but I might be able to help you. So anyways, just hit us up. We'll do the best we can for you. If you have a question you'd like to get on air, go ahead and drop me a line, and I'll try and find an attorney who specializes in that area, and we'll get to it. Attorney Mack, I don't want to go on too far just yet because I've got a lot of raging questions. There was a raging question that came from the audience over here. What about driving to work?
So driving to work 9 times out of 10 is not going to be, if you're in an accident while driving to work, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be compensable workers' compensation. So your commute to and from the office doesn't count. There's an exception for people who, let's say you don't have a home base. So for instance, let's say you provide home health care to elderly or disabled persons. And so each day you're driving to that client's home. If before you, when you leave your house, if your job reimburses you for that mileage, or you clock in, or that's considered time worked, and you're in a car accident on the way to that client's home, then that would be compensable workers' comp. For most of us, it's not, but something that does come up for the rest of us are lunch breaks. And so the general rule is that if you're injured while on lunch, even if you're still in the employer's facilities, it's not workers' comp. But there's some.
Oh, I thought you were about to say it was workers' comp.
No,
it's not?
No,
Okay.
generally, and yes, I had a call earlier this year from someone who cut themselves on their lunch break, and it's generally not going to be workers' comp. There's some wiggle room in there. There's some people whose lunch break is spent doing a lot more than eating. Maybe if you're a supervisor, or you're still subject to answering calls or communicating with other people, and you're really not on break, or you're on break subject to someone calling you to complete a task, there's a little bit of wiggle room. But for most of us, if we're on lunch and we're injured, it's not going to be covered workers' comp.
Okay, so that's not covered. Now I want to get back to the mental stress and the mental illness area of things. Now you said most of that's not covered, but what if your job is so stressful that you have like a nervous breakdown at work? I mean, you just start you just start standing up and down and sitting down, standing up and sitting down. That's all you can do.
In the state of Georgia, it's not going to be covered.
Still not covered.
Yes, and I think the issue there is just it brings up too many questions about legitimacy, about whether someone maybe has a prior history, or someone is already susceptible to having a particular mental health problem, or it's just not concrete enough that the legislatures feel comfortable holding the company accountable because a given person is not able to deal well with the stress of their job.
Okay, so we've gotten through all that now, and I think I know the answer to this question because you kind of talked about driving to work. I wonder if that answer is the same as driving away from work. You're leaving work and you're injured.
Yes, it's generally the same when you're leaving work. There's maybe more exceptions here, especially for people who drive a company vehicle. A lot of times they may be off the clock, but then have to return the company vehicle to a specific location, right? So that's a scenario where an injury while driving the company vehicle, while returning it to your job, may create some type of benefits. There's also people who travel for a living, whose job requires them to go to different states to, audit businesses or whatever they might be doing. All that transit is included. So if you're injured in the airport and you're about to fly out for business purposes, that's going to be workers' comp.
Now that's really, really interesting. I hadn't even thought of that. I mean, the last company I worked for, they sent me all over the place, and I'd have to. I mean, I was gone for days at a time. Luckily
Yes.
It wasn't weeks at a time, but it's often days at a time.
Yes, I have a current client injured at a hotel, but he was out of town and at that particular hotel for business purposes. So it is covered.
So that is covered. That's really good to know next time I have a corporate overlord who wants to send me someplace. Okay, so what kind of benefits are we entitled to here? We talked about medical benefits a little bit. What else?
Yes. So this gets to the downside to workers' comp. I think in terms of who's covered under the statute and what types of injuries are covered, I feel pretty good about where Georgia sits. We want as many people as possible to be covered and to get that protection. But the benefits that you're entitled to are limited. It's a system of limited remedies. You're really only entitled to two things. The first thing is covered medical treatment. That includes not only is the workers' comp insurance going to pay for your visit to the doctor, but also your prescriptions, mileage reimbursement to and from the doctor. If you need any type of equipment or devices, let's say you need a brace or you need crutches on the small end, that's going to be covered. On the larger end, for more catastrophic cases, for people who have permanent disabilities and permanent needs, workers' comp will even come into your home and modify things, re-outfit your bathroom or bedroom to accommodate a wheelchair. They will provide home health care for you, a home nurse, someone to do the task of daily living within your home, like clean, like cook, yard work. So the definition of the medical the benefits that workers' comp provide is pretty expansive. So that's the first thing is covered medical care.
Okay, so that's just it, just covered medical care?
So the second thing is lost wages. So
That's what I was getting to, some money.
right.
We
Yeah,
want some
money.
cash.
So lost wages. So first there's a holding period. So you have to miss 7 days of work before you're entitled to any reimbursement. So if you're injured and you miss 3 days of work and you're an hourly employee, unless you can use some other type of, PTO, that's just going to be kind of money lost. But once you've missed a week, then you're entitled to what we call temporary but total disability benefits. So if you have a temporary period where you're totally unable to work, then what you get is 2/3 of your average pay. So the big thing to note there is that you're not getting 100% of your wages reimbursed. It's 2/3, and that's 2/3 up to a cap. So for high wage earners, you're not even getting 2/3, and the cap right now in Georgia is $575. So for anyone that makes
That's $575 a week?
yes, so if 2/3 of what you make in a given week is more than $575, you're going to get $575.
Ouch.
So again, people, a lot of injury occurs in jobs where there's a lot of physical labor and the wages might not be that high. But even in an office setting, you might trip over your computer cords, you might fall in the restroom. I've had a college professor with a workers' comp accident.
Wait a minute.
Nurses.
What happened to the college professor that he couldn't go stand in front of a classroom in a wheelchair?
Well, it was a very bad fall, and it caused a hamstring repair.
Oh, wow.
And also the nature of where the classes needed to be held and the size of the campus, the ability to move from different buildings. There was a period of time where this particular client was completely unable to work.
Wow, that is pretty heavy. So wages are somewhat covered. Medical care is covered. Can I just go see any doctor that I want to go see?
You cannot.
Oh, you can't?
No, you cannot. And that's much to the dismay of pretty much every injured worker. The medical treatment that you're entitled to is
Alicia, I'm going to stop you
Okay.
right here, and why don't you give them some contact information? We're running up against a break, so just give them some contact information for you real quickly.
Sure. So to reach me, you can Google Attorney Mack. You can find me online at www.attorneymack.com, or you can give me a call at 770-450-9599.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law. This show comes to you each and every single week, and what we want to do is we want to empower you to be the best you can be. We want to give you information. This is designed to be a first step process in your legal search. If you don't know where to go, what to do, what to think about, you can listen to my show. There'll be a topic that might relate to you or that you might relate to, that you might need to know more information on, and we can help steer you in the right direction. We've got even more stuff coming up after this break. We're going to talk about other benefits, remedies, what doctors you cannot go see, and what's covered and what's not covered. We'll be back right after these messages. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I'm your host this week and every week with Lewis on the Law. We are here each and every single week to empower you, the listener. If you have an idea for a show that you'd like to hear or a topic that you'd like to hear on air, and just drop me a line on my website, on my last page, the contact page. And if I like your topic, I will find an attorney who actually knows something about your topic, bring them on air, and we will talk about it. I have an awesome segment left here for you. I have Attorney Mack here on the show with me. I always want to throw the Alicia in, but you said, no, just Attorney Mack. That's kind of cool. And it's even cooler that you can just Google Attorney Mack and you come up. I don't have anything as cool as that going on.
Well, I don't know. Well, yeah.
She said, yeah, it's pretty cool. I have to
no,
admit,
it's not cool.
Pretty cool.
It's not cool.
Yeah. Okay, so when we stopped last, we were talking about what doctors you can go and treat with.
Mm-hmm. So yes, this is one of the downsides of workers' comp is that the medical treatment is controlled by the insurance company and by the company you work for. They in the state of Georgia, an employer is required to keep a list of at least 6 physicians within a certain mile radius of the job site. And when someone is injured on the job, their employer is supposed to show them the list, and the injured worker chooses one of the 6 doctors. That format sounds simple enough, but in practice, it gets complicated. Sometimes the list is not shown, the doctors on the list, their contact information is not valid, and just throughout the course of the treatment, I think generally you and I, we go to the doctor, our doctor recommends something, we choose to get it done or not. In workers' comp, you go to the doctor says, hey, we need to perform a surgery. You now have to wait for the insurance company to evaluate that referral. Everything has to be evaluated. Sometimes they want a second opinion. There's a lot of unnecessary time delays in workers' comp because the insurance company is so involved in the medical treatment.
Well, that sounds like that could be really, I mean, if it's like a really bad injury, say you have like gangrene setting in your leg, not that it might happen, can you really afford to wait that time?
No, you cannot. That is an area of the law that is kind of hot topics within the lawyers that practice workers' comp, where it's a known problem that we have. And it's what drives a lot of people to get a lawyer is treatment delays. I've definitely seen multiple clients who've come to me because they had a surgery that was denied, or the insurance company just hasn't said either way, and literally 3 or 4 months have gone by, and they're still waiting to hear if they're going to be able to get this particular surgery covered or not.
Wow, that is heavy. Okay, so we've talked about some things that aren't covered. Mental illness, which I thought would be covered, isn't covered. Lunch breaks aren't covered. What else is not covered here that we would think is covered?
So what's the big things that you don't get in workers' comp are not so much about specific types of injuries that are covered, but benefits that you don't receive. So in personal injury, which I think a lot of us are familiar with, let's say you're in a car accident, and in addition to doctor bills and time off work, you're in a lot of pain. The incident really disrupts your life. You may not be able to play with your children. You may not be able to do extracurricular activities. In most other types of torts, in all other torts, there's compensation for your pain and your suffering. There is not compensation for pain and suffering in workers' comp. So no matter how long you wait for that surgery, no matter, how poorly your job treats you or people speak to you, whether there's some adverse action on that end, you will not get additional compensation in workers' comp for your pain or your suffering.
Okay, that's good to know because that's something that you think is always added in it. Mm-hmm. And I'm still surprised about the lunch break. I mean, I thought next time I hit the gym on lunch, I'm not on anybody's clock, so it's not going to work for me anyways. Well, next time I have a corporate overlord, it might happen.
No,
it might. It depends on how my law firm goes. Okay, so let's talk about how workers' compensation works with other benefits and remedies. Like we talked a little bit about short-term disability, long-term disability. Mm-hmm. How do they relate together?
Sure. So workers' comp generally does not play well with other types of benefits. Does not play well with other benefits that relate to the same incident. And what I mean by that is other claims that you might bring off of based on this particular injury or the accident that caused that injury. So short-term and long-term disability policies exclude workers' comp. So workers' comp is a benefit that's provided by law. The legislature requires that certain companies have it. Short-term and long-term disability is a matter of contract. But those contracts will say we do not cover workers' comp injuries, right? So no short-term, long-term disability. Another big exclusion is unemployment benefits. So you cannot draw Social Security wage checks and unemployment checks at the same time. However, what tends to happen and where people do draw unemployment is you've been injured and then you're terminated. And at the moment you're terminated, you're not actively receiving workers' comp. No one is paying your medical benefits. No one is paying for your lost wages. You want to apply for unemployment benefits, right, while you can, if you're not receiving it. But if you're actively receiving workers' comp checks, then you can't also get unemployment.
Wow, so you can't, I guess it's kind of like double dipping, though, when you really think about it.
It is, because workers' comp, if you're receiving a weekly benefit check, then they're reimbursing you for the money that you've lost, and that's what unemployment is designed to do. So they're not going to provide benefits at the same time.
So workers' comp or short-term, long-term disability, They don't work together.
Correct.
Unemployment doesn't work together.
Correct.
Are there other benefits and remedies available here?
So there are. There's two things that do work with workers' comp and the claims are derived from the same incident or accident. So the first is going to be Social Security disability. So someone can be receiving workers' comp benefits and Social Security. There's going to be an offset, and for clients who want to apply for Social Security disability, I will typically consult with an SSD lawyer because it's really on the Social Security side where the paperwork has to be done and where the credit is taken. But yes, you can receive them both. The other thing that comes up is retaliation. So
Wait a minute, retaliation? What do you mean by that?
So just like there's whistleblower protection or how unions provide protection, if your job takes adverse employment action against you because you filed a workers' comp case, then you're allowed to file a claim against them for retaliation. And the retaliation statute is federal. It's actually under OSHA. But that's a claim that you can legitimately have after an on-the-job injury. And the last areas are those that don't apply to the injury or the incident specifically. So, for example, if you already have a claim or feel that you have a claim in age discrimination or sex discrimination or religious discrimination, those claims don't have anything to do with your workers' comp case. So you can still bring those, if they came up before or after your injury. They're not related to what's going on with your injury at all. So all of those claims will survive.
Okay, so you can make claims that aren't related to the injury.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the loaded word, related. I remember
It's a nucleus of fact.
Yeah,
I think that's what we called it in con law.
Yeah, exactly. That can be a loaded term.
Yes.
Some of those legal terms are heavy and loaded with lots of stuff. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, let's bring this to small business owners.
Mm-hmm.
Say I'm a small business owner. How do I know if I need to have some sort of workers' comp, some sort of insurance here to protect me?
Sure. So the general rule is that any company that regularly employs 3 employees or more must have workers' comp insurance. And then there's a caveat for the really big businesses that can opt to self-insure. But for a small business, you would need the actual insurance and not to self-insure. So it's 3 employees or more that are regularly employed. Regularly employed is a loaded term as well. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It doesn't mean 3 full-time employees. You can have possibly 3 part-time employees and you still need coverage. So once you have really 2 people working for you or with you, it's really, really wise to consult with a lawyer or an insurance agent if you already have some other type of general liability coverage, to call them and see if you're covered based on the nature of your business, whether you're an LLC, a sole proprietor, or a corporation. There are different rules about where you as an owner are considered an employee or not considered an employee. So sometimes if it's you plus 2 others, you need coverage. And other times if it's you plus 2 others, you don't need coverage. But that's based on the specific business entity.
Okay, so are there mistakes here that small business owners make commonly?
Yes. The biggest one would be not having coverage if you need it. There are some people that fall in a gray area, and then there's some of us, and I say us because I'm also a small business owner, who are just not aware of workers' comp and when you're supposed to have coverage. Many state and federal laws have a really high employee limit. You need 25, you need 50 employees for a lot of provisions. In workers' comp, you only need 3. So it gets by a lot of people. But the second biggest thing I would say is not reporting claims. I think, as small business owners, we're concerned about the bottom line and we want to save costs. And so someone gets injured and you say, you know what, if I report this to my insurance company, my premiums are going to go through the roof. I'm just going to pay it out of pocket. And that starts off well, but if the injury ends up being something significant, they need surgery, they need to be out of work for 6 months, then you're not able to cover it and you're reporting it late, which has consequences with your insurance company.
Well, Attorney Mack, this has been a great show. Thanks a lot for being here. Can you give them some contact information one more time?
Absolutely. So the best way to reach me is to Google Attorney Mack. That should bring up my firm, the Mack Law Firm. I'm located in Brookhaven near Lenox and Buford Highway. You can also give me a call at 770-450-9999. 9599.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law. I've had a great show today. I'd like to thank our producer here, Sam Davis. He's done an excellent job. Our videographer, video producer, Anthony Cook, and is 1190. I'll see you guys next week.